The primary driver in this is patient experience.
Okay.
We now don't require the pre-op testing, have anesthesia applied at a local level, right there in the office, have your procedure, and be home in less than 3 hours.
Okay. Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer Smith here, host of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast, sponsored by Pareto Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSite. Enjoy today's episode.
Where
I guess you have to prioritize,
pressure,
right? You have to prioritize the heart first and then the rest. So you're basically like, vehicle's
like
totaled, and now we're going to part out the vehicle.
Dude, it's $1 million procedure.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. But then, so once you get that heart right on ice, right? Is it that?
Well, no. So what they do is
Oh.
now they have they call it the heart box.
Okay.
And it's basically it's a chamber that you put the heart in, and
Dude,
they
that's
keep
like
it alive.
Sci-fi.
And I mean, the box is yay big.
Yeah.
Probably, right? And like that. And it's a single-use box that costs $80,000, just the box, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But they basically hook it up to artificial vascular structure.
Okay.
And pump blood through it.
Okay.
Right? So it's all self-contained. They got a unit of blood, the artificial valves or artificial vascular structure connected to the heart, and pump it, and the heart doesn't know any different.
That's crazy. And then so put that heart box.
Yep.
So is it being transported now on a plane somewhere, or what's happening?
If it's local, it's via ambulance.
Okay.
But if it's not, right, if it's not in DFW, then yeah, they put it on a plane. So they have a
And what's the window of time that that heart box can? It's probably pretty extended, then, right?
2 hours.
Okay. Jeez.
Medical City has a Gulfstream on standby.
Well, no wonder it's $1 million procedure then, man. Okay.
Yeah.
And then so
now you have your team from Dallas that goes up to, let's say, Denver. They go to harvest the heart.
Yep.
They have a successful harvest. They get back on the airplane, get back to here, and there's a team that while they're in transit has that patient in, prepping them. So they're under general anesthesia, prepped, open, ready to go. As soon as the heart is on campus, they start removing the existing diseased heart and bring that thing in.
And you said they've done it successfully 8 times?
8 times.
So did anybody not live after the heart was transplanted? Because you said there was
one patient out of the 8 that rejected the heart.
God.
But it was like 3 months later that their body rejected it.
So then I guess they passed them. But to think as complicated as what you just described, to only have one failure out of that. So then it's a limited procedure. You said it's been done 11 times because all
in
the
Texas, right?
Oh, okay.
Texas is only the 3rd site or 4th site in the United States to be doing it.
But everything has to align, right? The situation for the donor, the situation with and what circumstance requires that type of heart transplant versus what I would, I guess, consider a traditional heart transplant.
So a patient who's brain dead is different than a patient who is non-functioning. Right, they're basically a vegetable, right? And the family's like, hey, they're not going to live. They're going to have no quality of life. Unplug them. Versus the patient who's brain dead, they unplug it, but they don't unplug the patient until after the heart's been harvested, right?
Okay. $1 million. That is crazy. I assume we're ready to go. Did we catch any of that, Nathaniel? Okay, I figured we might even get to use that. That's a pretty gnarly story.
It's a crazy story, right? I mean, it is science fiction to the max.
Well,
right?
the heart box thing that you were telling me, but I've never heard of that. I just assumed it was a igloo cooler on ice that the heart was getting transplanted on. Do you know when that heart box was created or invented? I mean, I don't exist in this world, so I wouldn't know this stuff, but it seems new to me.
To my knowledge, going back to that conversation with Dr. Lima, I think that's been a thing for like 2 years.
Okay.
It's one of the things that's allowed for DCD transplants to start to occur on a more frequent basis, because now your geographic reach of patients who meet criteria and the family consents, because now keep in mind, you have to get the family to consent for the donor.
Okay. Yeah.
You also have to get the family to consent for the recipient.
Okay. Yep.
Because there's a risk. There's additional risk when the heart has completely stopped and it's dead, right? It's gone. That there could be some adverse effect or some adverse loss of function.
Okay.
That's not easily identifiable.
But I guess the premise is this now opens it up to more potential
100%,
donors, right? Yeah.
So they're saying the donor pool should increase by almost 50%.
50%. Okay. Then yeah, I'm curious. We could spend a whole podcast on this. We won't do that.
It's
right, but
crazy.
It's pretty awesome.
I mean, it's like this is a guy, like he's here in Dallas, and he loves doing this stuff too, like sharing the story and what they're doing.
Well, maybe it's Dr. Lima. You said, right?
Brian Lima.
I might have to ask you to make an introduction because that'd be pretty rad. Yeah,
he's a cool guy, right? It's not it's not in your lane. But that was one of the most viewed podcasts that we had.
Well, I believe the supply side and kind of what we're going to get into, and I'll go and introduce you so that we can get into the podcast. Nathaniel, you happy with everything? Okay. All right, so I'm here with CJ Brock, the CEO of Better Way Medical Group. How you doing, sir? Let's go ahead and introduce you, man.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, my pleasure. And hopefully we'll keep some of that prior because that was really interesting. But we were talking about heart transplants, and I was going to tell you that I haven't focused as much on the supply side of healthcare as I was like to because I focus so much on the consulting side and the benefits and the delivery side. There's also obviously the supply side, which is incredibly important to everything that we do on the benefit side. So, I would love to start talking about, and I think even this would cover that. So why don't we do this, CJ? Why don't you introduce real quickly what you do, and then we're going to go into your backstory and who you are, man.
Sure.
Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for three main reasons. Number one, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number two, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number three, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
So, as you shared, I'm the CEO of Better Way Medical Group. We are a specialty physicians group that's focused on driving site of service change from procedures being done in a hospital or an ASC now into the office in a procedure room.
Okay.
So trying to, with the advances we've had in medicine, and anesthesia, we can now do things in a much more convenient location for the physician and the patient, but also at a substantially lower cost and a lower risk of complication. And
because there's multi prongs, right? There's lower costs, which obviously everybody talks about. That's the first thing they think about is driving out costs. There's the outcome side, right? What's the actual quality of the procedure, and then the patient, which we're going to get into. I know you focus a lot on the patient experiences. Is that member getting a benefit, right? Not just the procedure was successful, but the entire chain of events is advantageous, if you will, versus what they're doing today. But before I want to cover Better Way Medical in great detail. But I'd like to get to know you real quick first, CJ. So where'd you grow up, man? Are you a Texas guy or what?
I am not. You probably tell I'm a Midwesterner by birth.
Where in the Midwest?
So I grew up in Wisconsin. Grew up in central Wisconsin. So if anybody watched the U.S. Senior Open this summer, that was about 30 minutes from where I grew up.
Okay.
Played a bunch of golf at that place. It's awesome. But born and raised in Wisconsin. Went to University of Wisconsin on a golf scholarship. Played for the Badgers.
Right on.
From there, I ended up.
So you studied risk management, which I think I found out over coffee. Which you were one of the elite company that's actually gotten into studying insurance somehow in college. What did you have interest in that, or what?
Well, it was funny. I'm talking to my advisor. I was going to do marketing. I'm like, I'd like to try to do something else too. Is there anything that's related where I don't have to take too many more classes and I can get a secondary degree? Instead of doing a minor. And he's like, yeah, actually, risk management and insurance. You should check it out. So
why was there so much overlap out of curiosity, marketing and risk management?
Just the business classes in general, like the business law is a central class to both. It's kind of part of that core curriculum.
Okay.
I think it was another 5 or 6 classes, and it was either take 5 or 6 classes that were specific to risk management and insurance, or take 5 or 6 fluff classes and not really be too interested, and it really doesn't do you any good. So
what did you think? Did you have any intention though to actually deploy that degree, or was it just because it made sense?
It's funny, I actually did. So there was a member at the private club that we practiced at that had his own consultant firm.
Okay.
So they were insurance consultants in the primarily in the public entity marketplace, where they would come in and they would look at risk profile of the school district or the municipality, and then they would look at the overlying coverages.
Okay.
And they would basically make recommendations back to the city to say, look, you're overinsured over here, you're underinsured over here. We're going to take this to bid with your permission, and then they go and take it to bid, which hadn't been done in a lot of those cases for
many years.
10 years plus,
okay.
right? So we were public enemy number one with insurance agents, right?
I bet, man. Yeah.
Because
it's amazing when you shine a light on where their clients are overpaying or paying for something that's unnecessary, how much noise you could create.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the client loves you and everybody else hates you, right?
Yeah.
Like there's you don't know what you don't know until somebody brings it to your attention. So it's really similar to what we're dealing with in healthcare right now.
Absolutely, man. That's what I want to shine a light significantly on that. I'm going to ask you though, so I don't want to miss it. You were a pro golfer, right, for a number of years.
I chased mini tours and Monday qualifiers for 4 years. I got into a couple of tour events, which was really cool. So I got the PGA Tour experience. Check that one off the resume.
Nice. So then, were you able to sustain yourself as financially, or were you during that time?
Yeah, I wasn't working. Fortunately, I had some sponsors that helped take care of me.
Okay.
I look back on it now. If I had the work ethic then that I have now, given that I have 2 little kids, maybe things would have turned out different. But at the end of 4 years, I ended up hanging it up, partially because of some personal health issues with back and neck, but partly because I just had that honest realization I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow when you've been part of the elite player syndicate at every level up until that point.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? I was a high-level soccer player in college, but then I got to be around guys that elevated themselves to being pros, and some had some nice careers. And you see like the percentage difference between you and them, and it's very small. But it's also, when you actually look at it at scale, it's very huge, right? Because the chasm for what was required for them to be a 10-year pro versus me not quite being there, it seems like on paper it's a little bit of a difference, but it's actually pretty huge, right? And I look back and go, well, maybe I'm actually glad that I didn't chase that too long, where I might have missed my 20s or something in setting the foundation for my career as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I mean, the game of golf is such a great connector of people. I've met some incredible people in my life because of the game of golf and because I play at a high level, and people like to play with people who are better than they are.
Yeah.
But I don't think there was any question whether or not I had enough physical talent. I look back on it now, I'm too social to be an elite golfer.
Do you have to be pretty isolated? Like,
very much so.
Okay.
Right. Like I see that as a lot of times your most elite athletes are a little bit quirky.
Yeah.
They're just different.
You have to have an insane drive, right?
100%.
To shoot, 1,000 free throws a week or whatever, there is a oddness about the obsession that's required.
Yeah. Well, and obsession's the right word, right? Because you don't get to that level without being obsessive. I happened to be watching a documentary on Dennis Rodman last night, right? And they were talking about Dennis Rodman's ascent through college, and he was talking about his commitment level. He would get up in the morning, go to the gym, go to class, go back to the gym, go get something to eat, go back to the gym, right? It's this almost obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just never going to be good enough, so I have to keep going.
Yep.
And I just like to sit and tell stories and have a good time.
The insurance and healthcare world's not a bad place to do that. But I'm curious though, when you hung them up, you had that realization. Did you have any idea what you were going to do next?
Oh, I had none.
Okay.
I had none. I had a daughter on the way.
Okay.
And I'm 27 years old, and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do now, right? And I was teaching in an indoor golf facility here in Plano, and just through one of the clients that I was working with, got into that discussion about what are you doing now? What do I'm asking questions, and I'm kind of poking and prodding.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting my first job in healthcare with a home health and hospice agency out of that. And life took off from there. So,
well, how did you get to Texas though? I don't want to skip over to that. Down to Plano. Met a girl.
Met a girl. I was living in Tampa, so I was chasing mini tours.
Yeah.
Right. Living the life. Went to Vegas to play in a pro-am, and she was out there on spring break with one of her teacher friends.
Okay.
And I'm out there with all my golf buddies playing a pro-am, and fate would have it that we would meet. And
so she must have been from Texas. Then,
from Texas,
right
from the Dallas area. And quite honestly, it was convenient because there was a mini tour here, so I could stay with her. And then I fell in love, and
the rest is
history.
That's amazing. So, all right, so you found yourself in Texas. You found yourself in home health. Like, tell me about that experience. Did you like it? Was it, obviously money was good.
It was a great first job, right? Yeah. I cut my teeth calling on physicians, calling on hospitals. And I guess it was 3 years in that space before I kind of hit a ceiling where I'm like, hey, I think I could do more. I want to do something different. Okay. And found my way into bariatric surgery. So I started on the nutrition side, working for a company that is at this point is still the number one provider of specialty nutritional products for bariatric surgery patients in the country. Okay. I ended up, with the guidance of the CEO of that company, I went to work for Covidien, which is now Medtronic, as a surgical stapling rep. So I worked in the OR for almost 2 years, schlepping hernia products, surgical stapling products. So anything that's in the foregut surgery category, I basically saw. And I saw some pretty gnarly stuff. But
yeah, I had some friends that would sell devices, man, and I've heard some stories.
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't enough. Like, there wasn't enough action. Okay. There wasn't enough diversity. It was the same thing over and over. Sure. And ultimately, I ended up going back to that specialty nutrition company, but now armed with how the whole universe works. Yeah. And things changed. I stayed in in what I would call the medical grade nutrition space for another 4 years before branching out and starting a surgical assist staffing company, where we started in orthopedics and spine, eventually got into robotics. We still have that company today. We'll have our 10-year anniversary here in October.
Congrats, that's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, anything that you can launch.
That you build and launch and it's sustainable for a decade is pretty impressive.
Yeah, so we're out of that. I've met some fantastic people, right? So having served orthopedic, spine, urology, colorectal, surgical oncology, right, a variety of specialties, I was actually calling on an orthopedic surgeon that was a shoulder specialist in Fort Worth, met Carrie Corrette, who was their basically marketing liaison at the time, and we got to talking about the in-office surgery platform that her hand and wrist surgeons had been working on, and that was 15 months ago already.
Wow, so that seems like a short period of time, though, too, as well. So why don't we so let's get into the premise. If you'll restate again what Better Way Medical Group is, and then because I want to make sure we don't lose that since we talked about it.
Yeah, so Better Way Medical Group is a physicians group at its core that is focused on delivering high quality, low cost surgical care for hand and wrist procedures in the office setting. So improve the patient experience, reduce the cost of care, reduce complications. It's better for everybody. From whoever's paying the bill to the patient to the physician, right? That's the premise of the deal. And right now we're hand and wrist only. We have.
Yeah, tell me about that. So the starting with the hand and wrist is just because the surgeons you're working with, that's their focus?
Yeah, our founding surgeons are Dr. Chris Bates and Dr. Nathan Leslie. Just wildly talented fellowship-trained hand and wrist surgeons. They really started following this technology Dr. Leslie did back in 2015. So this has actually been around as a treatment modality outside of the United States for 25 plus years. Right? It's the standard of care. You go to socialized medicine countries, places like Canada, the UK, mainland Europe. This is the standard of care for how your basic soft tissue hand and wrist procedures get taken care of. US is obviously behind, but these guys started following that technology, very interested, but couldn't figure out how to cohesively bring all the pieces together. COVID happens, and they're like, we got to keep things rolling. We can't just roll up shop because we can't take procedures to the surgery center. So Dr. Leslie stepped off and started pushing. And to date, they're basically 3 years in from having started this push. They performed about 2,500 surgeries in office.
In 3 years?
In 3 years in their location in Fort Worth. They're on about 1,000 procedure per year run rate between the two of them. it is, and that's just the in-office procedure portion of their practice.
So how would that compare, like in terms of the total procedure numbers that you said?
Yeah, so I mean, your average orthopedic surgeon, if they're doing 300 to 500 cases a year, they're busy. In hand and wrist, you'll see average case volume tend to go 400 to 600 to north of that because the procedures are shorter, right? They're obviously room turnover happens more quickly, but I mean, these guys are on a little bit different level where they're doing 1,000 to 1,200 procedures each per year.
Wow. I mean, again, not have much context. I mean, it seems like a lot of procedures.
It's a very busy practice.
Okay.
But it's not overwhelming.
Okay.
Right. I think that's the critical part. This whole move with site of service to in-office has allowed them to see more patients, treat more patients, have a better quality of life, and make more money. And they shouldn't be shy about being able to make more money.
Yeah.
Being a physician's hard.
Well, that's what I was talking to a physician yesterday about bundled surgical procedures, and I said the exact same thing. Nobody's asking the physicians to make less money. I don't think anybody's has complaints about that. It's like the total cost of care, the episode of care itself, where all the quote unquote unnecessary or overcharging happens. But I don't think anybody's saying, hey, we want our doctors' incomes to be beaten down. We want them to feel stressed out.
Unless you're the bukas.
Okay. Well,
right?
then,
I mean, let's be honest,
okay,
right?
Yeah, fair. Okay.
They've done nothing but cut physician reimbursement because that's really the only point of control for them. They are being controlled by some of the larger hospitals and health systems versus they can level control against the physician.
Well, then you go, no wonder we have a shortage of physicians. No wonder we have people, general physicians to surgeons, everything. It's like, well, of course we do. If you're overworking them, you're underpaying them, and they're stressed to the max. They're going, well, why am I doing this anymore? But not to take us down that rabbit hole. I think obviously what you're offering is a potential win-win-win solution. But let's go back to like general basic questions. Why is the premise that doing it in a physician's office is more advantageous than doing it in the typical facility it's done in today?
Well, let's start with the patient.
Okay.
Right? The typical experience for a patient to have a simple hand procedure or any procedure at this point is that they have to go through pre-op testing. There's time there. They have to go through their pre-surgical consult. Now they've got to schedule surgery, go to the surgery center. They're going to spend 4 to 6 hours at the surgery center. They're going to be under general anesthesia, which means they can't drive themselves there or drive themselves home.
Okay.
Right? And there's anesthesia hangover. The next day isn't the same. It's not back to business as usual, right? And now you've got your recovery.
Yep.
The primary driver in this is patient experience.
Okay.
Right? I don't want that to get lost at all.
Let's definitely emphasize that.
I am a huge advocate of being mindful of patients' time, right? We now don't require the pre-op testing because you're not undergoing general anesthesia, so you don't have to have your cardiac clearance. You don't have to have blah, blah, blah.
So it's far less risky, right?
Far less. It's also less risky, right? I mean, the average person, I don't know what the stat is right now, but I want to say it's 35 to 40% of patients in the United States have diabetes or hypertension, right? Or both. You don't have to undergo general anesthesia anymore. Now it's literally show up to the office. You can have your consult done, sign your consents, have anesthesia applied at a local level right there in the office, have your procedure, and be home in less than 3 hours.
Okay. Wow. Versus every one of those steps that you just said before, which is multiple days, multiple recovery days.
Yeah, not to mention, because you don't undergo general anesthesia, you drive yourself there, you drive yourself home, you can even go back to work.
That's crazy.
Right? So now instead of having to take 1 to 2 to 3 days off to schedule a simple procedure, you're now taking a half a day or less, and you can go right back to work because there's no brain fog, right? There's, it's well,
you said that much lower relative risk as well. So if I'm an individual, I'm not concerned about being pushed into this sense of urgency to get a procedure done, because it seems like obviously let's take carpal tunnel, for instance. You make sure this person you've diagnosed, they have carpal tunnel syndrome. The way that you described it to me, and I'd like to hear you describe kind of the procedure on the podcast, because it's super, seems like really minimal in terms of the outcome. But I'm not worried about somebody pushing me into brain surgery, right? This is something relatively routine, very repeatable, very simple. It's been done for decades, right? So there's going, okay, well, this makes sense. If I can get relief today, I can get pain relief today and long-term pain relief. Why would I not want to just go ahead and get it done, right? So could you tell me real quick, because you were describing to me earlier over coffee kind of what it would be like to get carpal tunnel syndrome procedure. PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
Carpal tunnel syndrome is really pretty simple, right? So you have a ligament that goes up through a tunnel.
Okay.
And it's a tissue tunnel, but that ligament or tunnel will get inflamed. So it gets enlarged and it becomes tight. It can, there's nerves that run through there. So there can be a whole series of symptoms that come along with it. But the simplicity of the procedure is that they're basically opening up the tunnel. So they're cutting the tissue to allow that tunnel to release and to open up to reduce pressure.
Okay.
Reduce pressure, reduce inflammation. The incision itself is tiny, right? It's maybe the size of your watch band.
Okay.
In terms of the width. It's one site of entry. They can go in, perform the procedure, and be out in as little as 7 to 8 minutes.
Was that the one? Was that our trigger figure you're saying, where you could even maybe watch it on a screen?
Yeah, you can watch all these on a screen, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's the cool part. If they're doing endoscopic, then yes, there's a screen, trigger finger. You can see them there, and again, there's a camera that goes in along with the device that allows for the cutting of the tissue, and the trigger finger can be done where they can make sure they get the release to the fullest extent, so you don't have a recurring issue. Right? Because when trigger finger is basically that finger is clicking or locking, it doesn't open fully right away. Right? It kind of catches. Well, they can, in that procedure, the physician's going to have you close your hand, open your hand, close your hand, open your hand. Okay, it looks like we got full release. We're good to go. Removes the instrument, tapes everything up, and down the road you go,
well, you said
right?
Conversely, if I was under general anesthesia where I couldn't communicate with the patient, I'm having to guess kind of, right, to whether or not I was able to.
No, that's exactly right. So you have a natural rate of revision that has to occur because you don't open it far enough.
Okay.
Right? You don't address the whole condition. And that's costly to the health system, right? It's a pain in the butt to the patient. It's costly to the health system. And look, whenever you're going in for a revision procedure, it's never as good as only having to go in once and get it knocked out. Okay. Right? And resolution, again, because you're awake, you're communicating with the physician, it's extremely high. It is an incredibly rare experience that a revision has to be done with something like a carpal tunnel or a trigger finger.
Okay. Well, so then let's talk about systemically. What has been in place that has caused this to be a rare type of circumstance, right? You said other socialized medicine countries do this in a hospital or a physician setting, in an office setting.
Yep.
We have not historically done it. So why is that? Why is the system set up in a way that drives up the cost and drives us to facilities? Maybe even the basic premise of why originally it was done that way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is about physician behavior.
Okay.
Physicians are going to perform in a way, and they're going to do procedures in a location where it's most advantageous for them, and it doesn't harm the patient.
Of course.
Okay?
Yeah.
Going to a surgery center is not bad.
Yeah.
Or to a hospital is not bad. But the physician doesn't get paid any more through traditional means to do the procedure in the office than to go to the surgery center.
Okay.
Well, guess what? There's additional supply cost, right? There's additional staff that has to be had to be able to safely perform procedures in the office. You have to create an incentive for the physician to challenge the status quo and shift site of service in this scenario. And I hate to, I'm just going to call a spade, right? we have to pay the physicians an appropriate amount to take on doing procedures in their office. There are external costs that they incur that they don't incur when they go to the surgery center.
Okay.
Right? The way a physician's compensation generally operates, if they're in private practice, is that they have their professional fees from everything that they do as a professional. And then usually they're an owner in a surgery center or a surgical hospital. So they're getting a portion of the facility fee in return from being an owner.
Yeah.
All we're doing is trying to eliminate cost centers, but beef up the physician professional fee, right? Let's make it easy for the physician to say, yes, I can do this in my office and it's worth my time and it's great for the patient.
Yeah.
Right? That's the premise, a better way.
Well, it seems like on the surface, right? To me, it seems like a no-brainer. So let's talk about what would it take for the physician to shift this direction and to set up with the staff, but also maybe the internal infrastructure in order to be able to take on these procedures in their office.
Yeah. I mean, what's really cool here is Dr. Bates and Dr. Leslie have basically, not pioneered, but they've perfected the pop-up procedure room model.
Okay.
Right? So you can use an exam room as a procedure room. There's very minimal change that has to happen. It takes about 20 minutes to move some things around, get the supplies out, make sure everything is ready, and be there to rock and roll.
Okay.
So, again, my biggest thing is this is not rocket science. We're not asking the physician to perform the procedure differently than what they've done thousands of times in training and in practice. What we are doing is we're asking them to use the tools and resources available to them with their existing staff and their existing facility differently.
Okay.
And that's not a hard lift. We have a highly repeatable model at scale to be able to go in and teach physicians how to do that, right? But then the second part is, how do they get paid?
Yeah.
Right? Every physician is having to represent their own interests with the payer. The physicians don't like it. The payers don't like it. Right? The payers don't want to make a change for one person and negotiate with every physician under the sun. Quite honestly, what the payers have shared with us is they want to negotiate with somebody who has a larger headcount. It's that whole idea of collective bargaining, right?
Yep.
You have more power to negotiate fair rates when you have more headcount.
Yep.
It's why your large health systems have exploded in acquiring physicians' practices and acquiring locations and sites. Same methodology, right? For us, we're not buying physicians' practices. We're not asking the physicians to be part owners in us. What we're doing is we're trying to create a consortium of sorts of physicians that have the same want and need. And we represent that want and need one time to the payer, and the payer gets this extensive network of providers to all do it the same under the same set of economic conditions, and it's very easy to measure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like it. And I was even thinking that we haven't covered the cost savings component here yet, but obviously one of the main reasons you were doing that, the cost savings, is the fact that we could drive down the cost overall, right? And so you were giving me some of these broad-based economics. I think you said 1 million procedures happen annually in the hand and wrist.
Yeah, in just the 5 most prominent CPT codes.
Just the 5, right?
5 most frequently performed soft tissue procedure codes. In hand and wrist, there's about 1 million procedures.
1 million a year,
yes.
Right? Okay. So then give me at scale economics, right, of what maybe could be at stake saving with your model. So maybe I'm asking you to do too much math in your head, but maybe even on a case-by-case basis, and we can extrapolate it up if you want. But I'm curious because I do think, even though you focus first and foremost on the patient, then you focus obviously on the quality of life of the physician. The other part of this triad is the fact that plans can save significant amounts of money too, right?
Yeah. So, it's really the math is pretty easy.
Okay.
Our average episode of care cost, when we look at all the different procedures that can be done in the office, is about $2,500 to do it in the office.
Okay.
Right? The average cost to do that in a surgery center is about $5,000.
Okay.
And the average cost to do that in a surgical hospital or an HOPD setting is about $8,000 to $10,000.
Okay. All right.
Right? So let's just assume that everything is done in the surgery center, which it's not, but it should be.
Okay.
You've got $2,500 on average across the full spectrum of procedures per procedure in cost savings.
Okay.
Multiply that by $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that's $2.5 billion when you add the zeros up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just on a conservative side, right? If everything would shift from the surgical center
correct
directly, right? And then that doesn't even include, or at least in your episode of Care for the Average Today, does that include potential revisions and complications on top of that, or is that simply just...
because again, you're in soft tissue hand and wrist procedures, complication rates are relatively low.
Okay.
Revision rates, we've seen published average 2 to 5%.
2 to 5%. Okay.
Okay. So
another 25 to 50,000 extra procedures a year
that are happening that really shouldn't need to happen, right? It's because the patient's not awake, the patient can't respond to your command, and do some intraoperative testing.
Okay.
Right? We can ultimately, the goal is take it to zero, right? The goal is always 0 revisions, 0 complications, 0 infections, right? But that's not realistic. There's always going to be some of those.
Of course, yeah.
But generally speaking, the way payment structures are set up with physicians and the way something like this should be set up is that the revision, the risk of revision or the cost of revision falls on the physician. Every tool is there for these physicians to be able to do it right the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not performing brain surgery here or spine surgery, right? I mean, let's be honest. These are small soft tissue procedures that take 15 to 30 minutes on average, and they're right down the middle.
Yeah. Well, and so what, I would say, what are the headwinds, right? Because I'm looking at this, right? And I always try to go, all right, you're the guy that you worked for this organization, you built it, right? So you obviously have incentive to convince me that it's effective, but I'm looking at going, well, what angle could I take where this wouldn't work, or what are the headwinds? What are the forces that are against you, right? So is it a geographic limitation to scale? Is it the fact that you only do certain procedures? Is it a combination? Like, what are you up against to turn this into something that's done across the country?
Well, first, I don't want to take credit for building this thing, right? Because I've helped to guide the process.
Okay.
But Dr. Bates and Dr. Leslie and Carrie have been instrumental in doing this, us as a group, right?
Okay.
We succeed as a team, we fail as a team.
Fair, yeah.
That's important for us. But I think the headwinds, are, before we talk headwinds, let's deal with what's not a headwind.
Okay.
We have a tailwind from the physicians. Okay. Traditionally, when you're adopting new technology or a new approach, physicians are standoffish. In this situation, these physicians are doing nothing different other than changing where they're doing the procedure. Therefore, the physicians are like, heck yeah, if I don't have to drive to the surgery center and wait for 45 minutes for them to get their lazy rear ends together to get the next patient in, right? And I can control the pace, I'm in. Pay me a little something more, yes, love that. But physicians are a tailwind. The patients, 100% a tailwind.
Yeah.
You can't imagine how many patients are afraid of general anesthesia. Everybody has had somebody that they know that has had a complication from general anesthesia, and guess what? What do you think the average cost is for an episodic complication from anesthesia?
No idea. I don't even have a guess.
About $100,000.
$100,000. Okay.
Right? We're dealing with great story, right? Here's a use case. Dr. Bates and Dr. Leslie, same day, doing the same procedure on 2 different patients, one in the office, one at the surgery center. The one at the surgery center has complications coming out of anesthesia and has to be transferred to the hospital and ends up in ICU for 3 days.
Oh my God.
That complication costs just over $100,000 for the health plan. Dr. Bates' patient went home and went on with their life, right? Why create the risk when you don't have to?
Well, so right? I even begs the question, and I don't want to skip over this thought. Why do we need general anesthesia in those settings? Why can't you just apply local anesthetic in the surgery center?
Well, I mean, look, that's happening in some scenarios.
Okay.
However, there's still a facility fee. Facility fee makes up 80% or more of the total episodic spend.
Okay.
Right? So the idea is, and oh, by the way, anesthesia is still charging. It's not the physician applying the local anesthesia. Generally, the anesthesiologist, the facility requires that any anesthesia given have to be given by a licensed anesthesiologist. Right? So you haven't eliminated any of the costs. Now the patient's awake. Okay, that's great.
But then, so if I do it within your model, my physician can deliver if they choose to.
They are completely capable and willing to deliver. It's a combination of lidocaine and epinephrine, right? It comes pre-mixed, so they don't have to think about it. They draw the appropriate amount. We teach them how to do that if they need to be taught, and down the road we go, right? I mean, the biggest headwind, right? The patients are on board, the physician's on board. The biggest headwind is the payer,
okay,
right? Our biggest challenge right now is that the BUCAs control a large swath of employer-sponsored lives, right? They are not willing to change. They just aren't, right? Why change something that's producing results on Wall Street like they've been producing, right? So it becomes incumbent on us to, while we're engaged in dealing with the BUCAs, it is incumbent on us to be sprinting to deal with the self-funded employers and their support teams that really understand the value of what we can deliver, right? So whether it's brokers, consultants, TPAs, the employers themselves, right? We have to get outside the box and think outside the box on how to deliver our solution in a nice, neat little package that can be easily executed.
Well, that's a great segue, because I did want to actually talk application at the employer level. Obviously, I told you beforehand, I think the majority of the audience of this podcast are consultants, right? Or interested consultants in finding new solutions continually. So let's talk about how we apply this to a self-funded employer, right? So are you typically if you're having a conversation to get access to an employer, it's probably through, like you said, the TPA or the consultant channel, right?
That's absolutely right, through the advisor, right? Our intent, very thoughtfully, is not to try to leapfrog that trusted resource for the employer.
Well, it's good instinct, but it's also, honestly, it's the right way to do it, because those consultants obviously not only have access to hundreds of employers potentially, but their job is to represent objectively that employer on behalf of those vendors to make sure they are putting in the right things, and it makes sense. But so, like, if I'm going to look at this for a self-funded employer, how are you putting it into a plan, or how are you making it where the members are aware and there's the right incentives and things in place so that they are using this as an alternative instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're at the point where we're actually helping develop the solutions as we come across the scenarios. Everything is a little bit, every solution or every need seems to be slightly different. Some consultants and brokers and employers are armed with third-party partners that have formed these alternative networks, right? So we're plugged in over there. We can create the delivery model custom to that employer, like with Kempton Group out of Oklahoma. Right. We have a direct relationship with them. They have the relationship with their employees, and with our help, we go in and co-educate the employers and the employees.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. The communication piece is obviously key, because if I'm a member that doesn't know heads or tails about most of the part of my plan just because I don't use it much, or I'm just not paying attention that much to everything that's there, how am I aware? How am I made aware that when I do need carpal tunnel syndrome surgery, that this is the path I should take?
You know, what's interesting, we've been piloting a concept of, with the permission of the consultant and the ones that are driving the benefit plans, to actually go in and do free screenings.
Okay.
So we'll actually go to the location of the employer, and it's literally a 5-minute consultation. So it doesn't wildly disrupt the day of the employee. We're right there on site. We bring in the mobile technology that we need to be able to run the screening. And we deliver the education and the result and say, look, if you'd like to schedule something because you feel like this is problematic, we have a solution right here, and we'll get on the phone and help take care of that right now. Right? That hands-on approach, we believe, is going to be incredibly valuable in what we do. Because people wait. Hand and wrist pain is oftentimes written off as something else, or people deal with that longer than other types of major joint pain. And
because it's a little bit more palatable, you can deal with it, right? Or when you say it's written off something else, maybe like arthritis or something.
Exactly, right? Or it'll resolve itself.
It'll resolve itself.
But again, I think the biggest, kind of going back to the core question, which is how do we serve this up to the utilizers? I think it's a combination of us having to brainstorm with the benefit advisors and with the employers to make sure that there's appropriate incentives in place and awareness tools, but then us being able to just step foot on the street and get right to the employee with the employer's approval.
Yeah.
To plug in and help them understand the importance of hand health and how does this work? What are your options?
Yeah.
Are you a candidate, right? The best thing that we do is we eliminate the fact that you have this condition or that you're a candidate for this type of treatment. Yeah. Right? I think what people don't understand is that there's oftentimes opportunities to use non-invasive, non-surgical methods to treat underlying conditions that have a great deal of success.
Right.
Surgery should be reserved for people who really need it.
Yeah. It shouldn't be the first option, right? Presented most of the time. And unfortunately, sometimes it is. And I think even like I've heard some statistics on spine surgery, the number of times it really is pretty scary, honestly. It seems like almost the majority of them probably shouldn't have been done. But that's a different story for a different day. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about, we're going to zoom out in just a second and talk big picture of healthcare. But right now we're focused on hand and wrist. Mm-hmm. You told me perhaps that there is the intent to expand to other parts of the body in the future. Yeah. So what would be next on the menu?
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
Yeah, for us, being able to grow and create a complete footprint in Texas in hand and wrist is number one. That's our job right now today. Obviously, to continue that expansion is critical as well into other parts of the country. But we also believe there's another 4 to 5 specialties that have the same underlying opportunity for us to drive improved patient experience, improve physician quality of life, and drive down costs. Same thing, right? And it really starts with podiatry.
Okay. So that's feet.
Foot and ankle.
Okay.
Right? There's opportunity in pain management. There's opportunity in ENT, dermatology. I questionably opportunity in sports medicine. What's interesting, what's happened here, just as a point of reference, with hand and wrist, that also includes elbow. So a common condition that people have, tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, can actually be treated percutaneously in the office.
Okay. Percutaneously, I don't know.
Percutaneously means we can do it basically with a needle, right? So minimally invasive, and cure it right there in the office under local anesthesia. And again, it's highly cost effective, highly effective in terms of time and
curiously,
access.
I would ask because it seems like the knee is being avoided, right, in terms of your strategy. So what makes the knee joint so much more complicated to be able to do this?
Yeah, I mean, when you start dealing with knees and hips,
they're just so obviously a hip replacement or knee replacement. That's a very complicated surgery.
Yeah,
I get that.
But even a simple knee scope, right? I think there's still development of technology to allow for access and to allow for that to be done under local anesthesia.
Okay.
It's a concern, right? Will it eventually happen? Probably so.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
There's other parts of the country that are doing shoulder scopes under local anesthesia.
Wow.
Even rotator cuff repairs, I think in Sweden, don't quote me on that, but we know somewhere in Europe, we know that in Europe, they are doing rotator cuff repairs under local anesthesia.
No kidding. Okay.
So it's, for us.
But there's an order of operations, right? There's things that are
100%.
most obvious to do next.
100%.
But it sounds like geography is the first thing of expansion. So you mentioned, I think, Dallas-Fort Worth and San Antonio is your presence currently today in Texas, right?
Yes.
And then they'll obviously increase coverage. But you said something to me interesting off camera before about what you felt it was, like the number of physicians you felt it was necessary to have to saturate the country was far below what I thought. So you want to talk to me about that?
We think that number is 120, maybe up to 150.
Okay.
For hand and wrist.
But so total 150 surgeons total.
100%.
So how?
Well, I think what we're seeking to do is set up regional centers of excellence.
Okay.
Right? High concentration of physicians in huge, highly densely populated markets is a requirement.
Sure.
Because people have a different expectation. But if you're in a smaller secondary market or in a rural market, you're accustomed to having to drive for certain things. Mm-hmm. And in that situation, what we want to do is we don't need 30 people in Missouri or Nebraska. We need 3 in Nebraska and maybe 5 or 6 in Missouri.
Okay.
Right? Because the geographic reach of that being 2 to 3 hours to get to the provider. And by the way, because again, you're doing it same day, it makes that 2 or 3 hour drive in and 2 or 3 hour drive home and it being a day trip a whole lot more palatable when there's no general anesthesia. The other thing that I would really advocate for is I think that there should be some sort of economic incentive for these patients.
Totally.
We see it in some medical tourism parts of our space, but the cost savings are so outrageous. Why not create a cash incentive for that patient to do this and to not have to pay any out-of-pocket expense?
Yeah.
So A, 0 out-of-pocket for you to go and use this provider that is located 2 hours away. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to write you a check for helping us reduce our overall healthcare spend.
Yeah. For your inconvenience of having to travel 2 hours, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's when these things become like a clear no-brainer to me, is when the patient or the member or the individual person has the right economic incentives in place to make them voluntarily make that choice. You're not saying you have to do this. You're saying here is an option. And by the way, if you do this, here are your economic incentives to make that choice. Right?
Yeah. And look, I think in what we're doing, it's really complex when you start dealing with facility-based procedures to be able to start building all these programs and whatnot. This isn't hard, right? If we amass a physician network of 150 physicians across the country, and it's part of a covered service with no out-of-pocket expense, hey, they're on this preferred list, and oh, by the way, if you use this preferred list, you get this check. I mean, as an employee, I'm like, well, heck yeah, every time I need a healthcare service, I'm going to go look at that list first, right? I think we make this more complex than what it needs to be from an operations perspective.
Yeah. Well, it has to be simple to work. It has to be simple to scale, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want all these hoops that I have to jump through. I mean, from a administrative standpoint, it has to be as simple as possible. For the patient, it has to be as simple as possible. The economics have to make sense. The physician needs to be incentivized to do so. And then the plan needs to benefit at scale by doing this multiple times a year, right? And saving the money on the plan. I think all of those pieces sound to me like they're already in place, right? But it's still relatively in its infancy.
Here's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
For your brokers and consultants and your TPAs that are listening, my challenge is don't allow limited geographic reach to stop you from exploring or pursuing this opportunity, right? We often think that we need a critical mass of X number of doctors or X number of locations or X geography covered. That's not the case, guys. Like in this situation, we see patients from New York get on an airplane and fly to Dallas, have their procedure done, and fly home the same day.
So like domestic medical tourism, I think you call it.
Domestic medical tourism, right? It needs to be part of becoming normal because healthcare is slow to change. If we didn't push, nothing would ever change. Right? We have to push and we have to incentivize to get people to think outside the box. And look, we're entering, there's a generation of young people entering the workforce that know how to use these digital tools and know how to leverage. And oh, by the way, I'm not going to say they're cheap, but they're much more mindful, right, of the dollars that they have available to them. There's a lot more economic pressure. Costs more to rent an apartment. It costs more to get a car. It costs more to drive that car.
The general willingness to question the status quo. Like, I mean, it's like, why is it this way, right? And if I have a question, I mean, I had a 27-year-old gal, not on the couch. She came over to the other studio, but she started a company with her co-founder called Slingshot Bills, where they do an automated look back to find errors. And she was 26, 27 years old when she started this. And she looked at a problem she had herself and said, well, why don't we just go solve this, right? Like, I love that sort of the ingenuity, right, that comes with a young person questioning why this system is set up the way it is. And I sit in that middle gap. I'm 40, so I'm like, I still have the reason why it's this way, young person, is this. But no, I'm open and I want to highlight the things that are innovative, that are going to structurally change the system for the better, right?
Yeah. You know, so I've got a mentor. I'll kind of leave you with this.
Okay.
A mentor that his favorite saying is, life is messy. Change is messy. organizations have to embrace messy.
Okay.
You have to just go do it and problem solve day by day, because every day that goes by, you miss the opportunity to incrementally get better. If you figure out it'd be 1% better day after day after day, that's 300% better than you were at the beginning of the year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I want the message to those that view your podcast to be, don't wait, right? There is no reason to wait with an opportunity like this. If we can't serve you, we're going to direct you to somebody that we think can, or we're going to tell you this is how long it's going to take to get that done in market A, B, or C. But ask the question, engage, push, make this a priority to embrace this type of patient care initiative, because your employees are going to notice.
Yeah.
And
well, in the day and age when recruitment and retention is on the cusp of everybody's lips, right? All employees are thinking about, how do I get the best people in and how do I keep my best people, right? You got to figure out ways to keep them happy. And this seems like an obvious way. Small, right? This is a niche, but it is a niche that at scale could actually make a dent in this thing. And so these are the type of things that I love to highlight. I think you had really good instinct to way, kind of closing thoughts. But I want to ask, how do people get a hold of you? Like if somebody's, you've piqued their interest, and I'm sure a few people out there listening you have, what do I need to do to get in touch with you and start putting this in motion?
Yeah. So you could, you can reach out to me directly. I'm never not working. Okay. Right. That's kind of the, being in a founder's position. It's going to be cj.brock@betterwaymedicalgroup.com.
Okay.
Go to our website, betterwaymedicalgroup.com. You can find us there. That's probably going to be the two best ways to get in touch with us.
Yeah. And then is it Carrie, right?
And then Carrie, Carrie Corrett.
So she and I talked.
Carrie.Corrett, Couret, at betterwaymedicalgroup.com.
But we'll make sure, obviously, when we post all this, we'll link to the website and tag you guys and all that good stuff. But my hopes, right, is even if it planted the seed in one person's mind, right, like there are plenty of people out there that are really great consultants that are just constantly looking for, what can I do next for my employer to save money? And my hopes is this has obviously stimulated some of that thought. So CJ, I appreciate you coming on kind of as a, almost like as a whim, because I know Carrie set this up originally and you came in her stead. But it was great to get to know you, man. And I'm really, really hopeful that this thing scales at the pace that you guys are hoping it does.
Yeah, no, we're excited. We're excited. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to share what we're working on, right? Because that's part of the world that we live in.
Yep.
We have to share openly and freely and embrace change.
Absolutely, man. Well, my pleasure.
Thanks, Spencer.
See ya.